Explore the history, relationships, expertise, and data that go into ensuring Stine growers get maximum yield potential. This is the Stine Seedcast. Here's your host, David Thompson.
Hello, and welcome to the Stine Seedcast. I'm your host, David Thompson, National Marketing and Sales Director for Stine Seed Company. We've got another great episode lined up with special guests, expert insights, and discussion on everything you need to know about maximizing yield potential. Today, we have with us Myron Stine, President of Stine Seed Company. Welcome, Myron.
Hi, David.
So in this episode, we're going to be continuing Myron's Yield Plus Corn Tour. He's been traveling around the country, meeting with growers, talking about their use of Stine corn and the Yield Plus advantage, and how employing super management techniques can produce top-end yield results. 2 weeks ago, we heard him talking with Stine grower Darren Judd of Lostan, Illinois, who utilizes Stine corn and narrow row planting to achieve his yield goals. Now, Myron, who are we going to be hearing from today?
So today we're going to be hearing from Bob Manning of Central Iowa. And Bob has been in narrow rows and what I'd consider someone that's definitely in the higher management of corn for years. Bob has a lot of corn on corn ground. And Bob has some interesting, he does a really good job on growing corn, but he just has some interesting management tips that we'll hear about that everyone can take something from what Bob Manning does.
Well, let's have a listen to the interview and then stick around after for a conversation with Myron.
Hello, we are here today in Central Iowa with Bob Manning of Manning Farms. And Bob, thank you very much for taking time to speak with us today. We're going to talk about your farm, how you got started farming. We want to know some things you've done to be highly successful on your farm, and then we'd like to talk specifically about how you manage some of your corn hybrids within the Stine lineup on your farm. So tell us, when did you get started with farming?
Mid-90s. That 94 to 96 in there. Kind of did a little bit before that, but not a lot. Custom applied fertilizer, ag lime, and sprayed chemicals for farmers.
Yeah, did that all before.
Prior to starting farming, and quite a bit after we started farming, too. We still continued to do that until we're still doing it today. Custom applying ag lime, hauling, general trucking, and that started in 1975.
Okay.
And then 20 years into that, we kind of started farming.
And today you're not corn, soybean. Sometimes you have a few soybean acres, but you're primarily corn. Is that
primarily
correct?
Corn, yep, 100% corn, which we are this year, and it works best for our operation. I know it's expensive to raise corn, but we're high fertility. We have hog buildings where it creates, the hog buildings create half of our fertilizer needs, and then the other half is commercial fertilizer.
And you're in 20-inch rows, is that correct?
Yes, we are. Went to 20-inch rows, 15 years ago.
Okay.
And we love them. Yep.
And so I've talked to different farmers and different operations, and you definitely are one that I would call it super management of your corn. You've adopted a number of techniques to take the right corn hybrids and you put them in at higher populations. You feed those intensely. I mean, you do a number of things to make that corn crop go. And so what we'd like to talk about here right now is just some of those specific items. And without a doubt, I've known you for quite a while, Bob, and I know relative to other farms, you have made that work phenomenally. So a lot of people have interest in knowing what you're doing and how you get that done.
Well, high population, high fertility, to get high population, you have to have high fertility. And the ground pH is very, very important. Ag lime, having the pH up there where it needs to be. I've learned the hard way that we can't raise corn without sulfur. Sulfur is a very big part of our operation. Some of the practices that we have done with our sulfur is applying it closer to the crop year. So, one of our normal practices used to be put our phosphate and potash on in the fall, right behind the combine, deep rip, everything's conventional tillage. We deep rip and try to get rid of our stalks the best we can. Well, we have changed that up somewhat to putting our sulfur in with our phosphate and potash. For instance, 150 an application in a crop year would be 150 pounds of potash, 150 pounds of phosphate, and 150 pounds of ammonia sulfate. And that's where we're getting our 35 to 40 pounds of sulfur. And it's right ahead of the planter. We'll apply that. We'll spray our pre-emerge herbicide. We'll work it and plant it. And I mean work it, just scratch it and plant. And that's how we are in our conventional. Now our hog manure side, the sulfur's in the hog manure.
Okay.
And we found out even there, it makes a lot of difference what your water is, what your feed, or what you're giving them hogs at that particular site. If you got high sulfur in your water, in your wells, you got high sulfur in your hog manure when you're putting it out on the fields. Yeah, like it could double just due to that. Yes.
Okay. Now in your fields, you don't put manure on.
Yep.
And you're side dressing, because I'm assuming you side dress, right?
Some, yes.
Some. When you side dress, do you put any sulfur with that?
We do.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
So you'll do some then.
Yes.
Now tell me some. Have you had cases where you've taken the wrong hybrid and managed it how you're talking at higher populations and you poured the inputs to it and you had issues?
Yeah, and not only issues, you can kind of bomb out. It takes a special hybrid to handle high population and high fertility in a lot of situations. It takes finding them right hybrids.
And so when you say bomb out, you're talking about your yield.
Right.
Isn't there, not just standability, you're talking about the whole shebang.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, to the tune of, 50 to 75 bushel.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. So within Stine, I mean, you found some hybrids that you like. In fact, that's one reason I think you use Stine products, is specifically because of some of our hybrids that work in that environment. One of them would be 9714-G or the new MX 514-20.
Not familiar with the MX yet. Will be after this year. The 9714, though, it's a racehorse.
Okay.
And what that hybrid has, I call it vigor. It will blow out of the ground. I mean, I don't care how cold it is. I get a little carried away sometimes and start planting a little early. I might plant 5th of April, 10th of April. It's not really all that warm, but I have found that that's the first if I think it's a little cool yet, that's the hybrid I want to be planting early.
Cool.
I can plant 9714 a week ahead of everything else, and it blows out of the ground. The vigor it has, and not the corn scientists, and a lot of people are, but the cold germ on 9714 is tremendous. I mean, every single plant grows no matter how cold that ground is. You can put it on 45-degree ground and it'll blow out of the ground like it's 60 degrees.
And it's a shorter plant height, stands well.
Yep.
And I'm assuming you've seen that in your farm.
Yes.
You don't have standability issues with it. Some competing companies are coming up with some hybrids, some shorter statured hybrids similar to 9714. Do you think they're doing the right thing to do that?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, this corn, that's 12, 14 foot tall, and and the ear is above my head, where the ear placement is. I mean, yeah, they yield but I want my corn to stand too. I want something shorter so the wind doesn't blow it down. And I think that's a big part of that smaller corn, and
Sure.
and this is maybe kind of stupid, but you get a plant real tall, 10, 12, 14 foot tall,
Yep.
and it's shading a lot of the other plants. The shorter corn, it's absorbing them sun. It's absorbing it into the plant instead of being shaded out by some of the taller plants. And a big thing there in that taller corn, why I like the shorter corn, is trash. Residue management, when you're corn on corn, and I don't go to beans next year to help get rid of my residue, I go right back to corn again. I don't want a lot of stock. I want that shorter stock, get rid of that residue. I have less residue to eat up, and I think that's a very important thing. I like it black.
Sure.
And it's easier to make black when you have less residue.
Right. Have you ever, as far as the ear placement on 9714, for instance, there are some growers that are scared to death of shorter corn because they talk about they're afraid their ear placement will be too low. Have you ever had a case where you thought on 9714 your ear placement was too low and you couldn't harvest it?
Not once.
Yeah.
Not once have I had that problem. For instance, growing beans, you'll have a certain hybrid of beans that pods right down tight to the ground.
Yep.
They're hard to get them pods off of them bottom 2 inches of the stems, so got beans, the closest thing to the ground is 4 or 5 inches off the ground,
Yep.
They're up there, they're easy to cut, you don't shell no beans in the field. Corn, you don't have that problem, or we don't have that problem. I mean, our ground in our area and that we farm, the 6,500 acres, we don't have a lot of rolling ground. We're pretty flat, and we can get our heads right down to the ground.
Okay.
And do a safe and a good job.
What would you say today if you said what is the most important thing you've done on growing corn? The one thing you've learned, if you picked one thing, I know that's hard.
Yep.
But if you picked one thing out that you've done on your farm and growing corn that's been the best thing you've ever done, what would that be?
Well,
And I know that's tough because you have a lot of things that have to come into play.
But I can kind of answer it. I hope I'm going to answer this correctly, but it's probably hybrid selection. Okay, is a very, very important thing when it comes to it. I thought with the acres we had, and back 10 years ago, we were 100% corn. I thought, I needed to plant 102-day corn, and then I needed to, and get it in the field for our harvest. We can't harvest everything early, but plant my early numbers early to where I have something to start on, like the first 1,000 acres, and then the next 1,000 acres kind of move up to 104, 105 day, and then maybe go to 107 day. I've learned hybrid selection, kind of forget all that. And about the earliest thing I want to plant is that, like 9714, 107, 108 day. That's as early as I want to go. You mentioned Illinois earlier, by mistake maybe, but I'm the guy that I don't want 16% corn. I don't want 15% corn coming out of the field. I want 22. 22 is it. So I want a fuller season maturity to where I want 22% corn all year long. I don't want to start at 28 at harvest at the beginning, and then it gets down to 22, and then by the time we're done, we're down here picking 15, 16% corn. I'm not that guy. I want 22% corn all fall, so that results in from 108 to maybe 115 day corn. by the time I'm done.
And you want that, is that because of phantom yield loss?
Exactly.
You're trying to avoid that phantom yield loss?
Exactly. And a lot of people said it's not true. I've got data, stacks of it downstairs, that it is true.
Yeah, something's going on there.
Yeah, I don't know where it's going, but it's going somewhere.
You know, and we should talk something else. You talked about your grain bin facility out here. Maybe let's talk about that and how important that is for your business. And
you know, I mean, a lot of guys don't like spending the money to dry corn. I'm not one of them. I like to dry my corn. You know, I get more yield at that 22 to 25, and I want to dry it. And the only way I can do that is with my grain facility that I have. We can pick 50,000 bushel a day. I want to be able to dry 50,000 bushel a day. This past year, corn dried down easy. We only dried about 30, maybe 35% of our corn went through the dryer. The rest went right into either air bins or went right straight to the bins where we didn't have to dry it at all. I personally, which is very strange and very different, you know, I don't mind drying 75 to 80% of my corn, running it through the dryer. I feel I get more bushels that way.
Have you ever, and this is hard too, because I know this is a really hard question, but as far as trying to put a number on that phantom yield loss, if you were to wing it and say, okay, you know, I have a field here at 23%, and I have the same field at 14%, what do you think, in your eyes, from what you've seen, what do you think you're going to lose there in phantom yield loss?
$100.
Okay.
$100, I mean, and that's figuring $4 corn, not $7 corn. I mean, you can easily.
That's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge, but I mean, it's, it's very, and it is there. I mean, I've opened up fields and taken 20, 40 acres off of 160 and then come back a week or two later, and you know, I got my yield data there and I know what the corn was making on the monitors, and I come back and 10, 12 bushel an acre is gone, 15 bushel an acre is gone. Where did it go?
Right.
I don't know, but that 15 bushels an easy $100.
Yeah, that's huge. That's,
you know, that's either,
even bigger than what I thought you were saying.
Yeah, it's either making it or breaking it, and you know, it's very, very important. And how I want to back up to the question you asked me, what's one of the biggest things? That all comes back to hybrid selection. Mm-hmm. You know, I can't plant. I'd love to. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to plant 100% 9714. I mean, it kicks ass. It yields. Excuse me, didn't mean to, but
that's what it does, though.
It does. And, you know, but I can't plant 9714, 107, 108 day for all my acres, because I gotta start raising it up 115 day, because I run one combine on 6,500 acres, and I can't do that in 2 weeks. It takes me 6.
Yeah.
You know, so I plant my early corn early and my late corn late.
That's interesting too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's almost opposite of some people.
It's got to fit your operation, you know,
Right, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Some things I've learned from you early on here, you know, we looked at your machine shed and we looked at your equipment. So you don't have a lot of equipment for the acres at your farm, but it's all new.
Yeah,
it's all new,
expensive and getting more expensive every day.
But your philosophy is you want good equipment stuff. You don't want to work on it.
No. When I start planting, I want to, optimum to me would be start on the 10th of April and be done by the 25th.
Sure, okay.
And there's no room for breakdowns in there.
Yeah, not at all.
You know, with the equipment that we have, I mean, we only run one field cultivator, mm-hmm. we only run one planter, mm-hmm. and one sprayer, and things got to click. And yeah, they wouldn't have to be new, but very, something you're going to rely on.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the way equipment's getting priced anymore, and it's going out of sight, kind of like the fertilizer and everything else, equipment efficiency is going to be a big part of farming.
Mm-hmm.
You might have 3 or 4 tractors and 2 or 3 planters, and you're going to have a lot of equipment, whether it's paid for or not. It's a lot of money, and repairs on them are ridiculous. I mean, the efficiency in iron is going to be huge. I feel. I know there's a lot of people thinking other ways, but it's not only the equipment; it's the people to run that equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can go buy equipment, but to get competent people to run that equipment and enough of them, you find yourself managing instead of operating.
And really, what you're saying is to find people to repair that equipment's tough
Right.
too.
It is, getting tougher.
So you can go one
Yeah.
or 2 different directions,
And it's expensive.
yeah.
What we have found.
So you have new equipment. You want new equipment, and you try to get by with as little equipment as possible for your acreage. You've invested in a phenomenal grain drying facility and storage facility.
Yes.
You're focused on picking the right hybrids for your farm, and let's talk some more about that because.
Before we do, can I stop up and back up to just the equipment? A little example.
You sure can.
Before we leave this.
Yeah.
I always ran a 90-foot planter, 20-inch row, 90-foot John Deere planter, 54 rows.
Yep.
The high-speed deal come along, the John Deere high-speed, exact emerge. They told me a 60-footer is going to do the same thing as your 90-footer. And I said, boy, I have a hard time believing that. But, and I was religiously, running 5.5, maybe towards the end of the year, you might push it up to 5.7, but that was it. That's as fast as you can plant.
You're particular on your singulation.
Right, and very, very particular.
Yep.
Went to a 60-foot planter. I said, there's no way this is ever gonna work. We're gonna do it. It might take an extra week to plant, but we're going to back up to a 60-foot planter, just 36 rows, and go that route. Well, right off the bat, and I didn't push it up to 10. First year I had a high-speed planter, I planted at 8 mile an hour. And absolutely loved it and got done the exact same time I would have if I was running a 90-foot planter.
Wow, so
The next year, I traded planters and I went to the next year and I bumped it up to 9. Thinking, wow, I'm going to have a pile of junk behind me when I'm done this year. Nothing's going to handle being pulled at 9 mile an hour, through the field. It worked great. My singulation, my stand was better at 9 than it was at 8.
Really?
The next year I pushed it to 10. Right now I'm running that 11 mile an hour. And I think every year that I bumped up a mile an hour in my planting, I improved my stand.
Wow.
I know that sounds crazy, but that's what I found in our ground. Now, do I go through, in 6,000, 7,000 acres, do I go through a set of disc openers? Yes, I do. There's wear on that planter that, didn't have, but going from a 90-foot down to a 60-foot, and running faster, we're getting, and it's a lot easier.
You're convinced on the technology, it sounds
yes,
like.
Yes, I am.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear.
And, Myron, that's backing up to efficiency. You can buy that 60-footer a whole lot cheaper than you can that 90-footer.
Yeah. That's an excellent example.
And there's more people that want a used 60-footer than there is people that are wanting a used 90-footer. So your resale is considerably better, it's costing you less, and doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story.
I just wanted to,
That's the first, you're the first person I've talked to on the high speed to give that.
It's one of John Deere's, by far, best equipment improvement they've ever made.
That's excellent.
Is their high-speed planter. That's how much of a believer I am in it. And wasn't when I started, but this will be my 6th year, probably 6th year with the high-speed planter, and can't believe we did it before. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to back up to equipment again, but I wanted to throw that in.
No, I like that. We one thing we do on the MX series corn is we run that through a high-speed planter stand.
Yep.
To make sure our singulation is where we want it to be.
Sure.
And it's amazing. You can set those and you get 99.2 or 99.3% singulation.
Excuse me, but I think you could dump P-Rock in it and get the same singulation.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm not just blowing smoke up your choo-choo here. You really are, your management of corn is far beyond what a lot of different growers are doing. So that's why we need to talk about these things. And a lot of people will have interest in understanding what you're doing to get that to happen. So let's talk some on the side dressing part. So you've done side dressing in the past, but tell the difference between what you call your conventional ground and your manure ground. I'm assuming with manure ground, you don't need to side dress.
No, you don't. I don't know what I am missing there on my conventional ground. I don't know what micronutrient that I'm getting out of the hog manure that I'm not adding to my conventional program. But our hog manure kicks our conventional.
Just way better.
Yeah, and it's just year after year, and we pull samples, we soil sample, which we have to keep the government happy on the hog manure, so we don't get too much on.
Sure.
And we've backed it up, gallons per acre of the hog manure, and backed it up, and it still out yields our conventional fertilizer. And we keep backing the hog manure down and increasing the
conventional side,
side of the fertilizer, and we can't catch. We can't do what our hog manure is doing. It's just. But keep in mind, I'm corn on corn, so it's an every year deal where we're putting fertilizer. It's not like a rotation deal where guys only fertilize every 2 years. We're fertilizing every year. We're putting on hog manure every year. We're using less of it every year. I do supplement my hog manure with one thing and one thing only. It doesn't get any sulfur, it doesn't do anything, but I do go out there and put 80 pounds of anhydrous on in the fall.
Okay.
I did some tests where I didn't, where I did not do that and did test, we're not seeing a big difference. I don't know if my 80 pounds of expensive $1,600 anhydrous is paying me or not, but I just feel a lot more confident that come late July, August, that I'm not running out of nitrogen.
Do you put anything in the anhydrous to hold it?
Yes, I do. Use nitrogen stabilizers.
Okay.
So fertilization is big.
Yeah.
And I think soil sampling is too. It's how you going to know? Without
and you're not
sampling.
You're not variable rate on your fertility in any manner, and you're not.
I am on my ag line. I variable rate my ag line.
Okay.
But as far as the fertilizer, we're pretty much one rate.
Sure. And you do, your ground is pretty uniform.
Yes.
Around here, without a doubt. So Bob, let's get into fungicide, insecticides, and herbicides. And before here's something else to build on to that. How about traits in corn? With our company, you use just at the most above ground trait technology. You don't use any below ground. You're corn on corn. So have you had rootworm pressure in the past that you know of?
Not that I can see. Have we taken precautions to not have? Yes.
And what are those at this point?
Number one is get your ground black. We try to deep rip right behind the combine and give it as much time to make it as black as we can.
Okay.
Okay, and then our next is we put on our anhydrous with a chisel plow, John Deere chisel plow. So we're running deep and we're moving dirt again, trying to blacken it up, some more. And then anytime that we make a second or a third pass, we always put in insecticide to kill the beetles.
Okay.
Broadcast. When we go back with our Roundup, we're doing it. When we spray our fungicide, it all goes on with the helicopter aerial. We always put in our fungicide. Insecticide with our fungicide. We're always using an insecticide every chance we get. I have in the past, this will be my first year that I've gone away, that in furrow insecticide in the planter. This year, I'm gonna try it without it, but I'm scared. I'm scared of it. I don't know, because I've got neighbors that got rootworm problems, and they can do a lot of damage fast.
Sure. Yeah.
But have we had any rootworm problems? Not that the agronomists are telling me. And we scout for them a lot. We scout for them rootworm problems, but we have made precautions, and we're going out there every year. We're not every other year, and we do spray insecticide every chance we get.
We're working with a company, and we'll see if we can get you on the program, where they can come into your farm, they can grid sample your farm, and then hopefully come back and
very familiar with them
and tell you your probability of a rootworm pressure or not,
right,
which is interesting. Now on fungicide, 1 application, 2 applications, 3 applications? What have you done on fungicide in the past?
Always 1. We've tested some 2. We don't know but fungicide is very, very important. We've tried none, and that does not work. Okay. At least 1, and a multiple mode of action, like 3 different modes of action in the fungicide. It's very, very important. Has been in our case anyway. And we can show you to the row where the helicopter left a test strip, and I don't like test strips. I mean, I'm convinced that it works.
You have a sad face when you're in the combine.
Every acre that I plant, I want to spray fungicide. Now, there's one thing I got to back up, because this is kind of before a fungicide come in here. This is backing up to the insecticide part.
Yeah.
You opened this question by, your hybrids, and are you depending on your hybrid to do all your protection
with the trait technology, right?
And I plant traded corn, but I would like to get away from it. I think you can do so much better with the products to control the insects it takes yield away. I mean, the more traits, the less yield. And I'm sorry, they'll tell you, well, my untraded corn out-yields my traded corn year after year after year.
You've used Stine, just regular glyphosate-resistant corn. You've had a lot of luck with it.
Yeah, I have.
And
I have other seed companies and others say, man, that's really taking a chance by not having any below ground. We would like to sell you a below ground and an above ground trait. Yeah, it's all fine and dandy, but it's yield and it's dollars.
Yeah. We're in agreement with you on the trait side. I mean,
okay.
you with the 2 MX lines that you're planting this year, it took a lot of research to make sure that we had performance with those, and they have the above ground.
Yeah.
Or performance with those relative to the glyphosate versions. So, without a doubt, we see that, and definitely when you get into these triple stacks,
Yeah.
you better have a problem, because
Yeah.
if you don't have a problem, you're losing money. You're spending money and then you're losing some on yield. On the fungicide thing, when is the best time to spray fungicide?
My field is right there at fully tasseled,
Okay.
and early fully tasseled. I mean, get right after it. I'm not one of these that like to wait till that brown silk. When I start seeing tassels, I want to know where the helicopter's at.
And you have no fear on, in some hybrids, if you put fungicide on.
Beer can deers, no.
You've never had that issue?
No, I have not.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
Yeah.
We've seen I've seen some growers that have done one application early, like in,
V5.
Yeah, like the second week of July.
Yep.
And then they've done an application after, they try to do it after silking, after,
Sure.
Not right at brown silk, but probably pretty close to brown silk. And I'm a believer. I'm a believer in 2 applications.
Yep.
From what I've seen with different people that are doing the high management corn.
Yep.
Now, if you're in a situation where you're not really pushing your corn, I guess I'm not sure if it's as big of a deal, but I definitely think on a farm like yours, without a doubt, you have to do it. Now, what do you think about application of fungicide with drones?
Boy.
And here I'm asking somebody that has a custom application business.
But no, I mean, I know it's coming. How their coverage would be one thing. Mm-hmm. I know I explained that I have a helicopter, and that's not a lot of product either, but I mean, that helicopter, it just seems like the blades blow that herbicide down in, and we just have a guy that does a really, really good job of our fungicide application with the helicopter. I mean, he don't miss much.
Hasn't crashed yet?
No, hasn't crashed. But your question about the drones, I think it's coming, but I don't know if it's in the 6,000 to 7,000 acre.
Yeah.
Yeah. A guy that's a test plot. I think it's huge. I think that would be huge for him to go out and spray his 20 acres with a drone.
Sure. Sure.
And maybe like you said, back up to like you said, maybe 2-3 times. Mm-hmm. I think there's some benefit in that.
So Bob, on your farm, what do you do for herbicides on weed control? Anything special?
Well, yes, there is something special, and our corn on corn allows us to do something special, not use as much.
Okay, which is very special.
Right. Where you're corn on corn, it isn't real tough, and especially 20-inch rows to shade that out. You don't have a lot of weed pressure. And I got a lot of neighbors, it's 50% corn, 50% beans, and they fight their ass off with water hemp, have for several years, Mm-hmm. Well, when you're in a corn on corn operation, and you pretty much take care of your water hemp after a couple years of corn, or even 3 years of corn, or our instance, 10 years of corn, and then we go to beans, we don't have no water hemp.
Yeah.
I mean, the only water hemp we have is from the neighbors. We've killed ours, with multiple years of our herbicide. Doesn't take a lot of herbicide, and we're pretty simple when it comes to it. I mean, we'll do a pre right ahead of the planter, field cultivated in very lightly. Then we'll come back, with a Callisto product with a little bit of Roundup, and that's it for herbicide. It's a cheap program.
You have clean fields.
And clean fields. Now, how much are you contributing that to the corn on corn where you're shading it out? And that's another thing that I want to back up on you here. This is when we first started talking about how high the corn gets. They said, well, if you only got 4 foot high corn out there, what in the heck do you do to prevent weeds? Well, them weeds, They don't start when the corn's 3 foot tall. They're started way down there. So
You've got shading effect. I mean,
right,
I mean,
but
you have a canopy.
there's people that think the only way you can get shade the weeds out is have 12-foot tall corn.
Oh.
That's untrue.
It's good for people to hear that because you've been using short-statured corn now for years,
Yes.
and you've had phenomenal success. You are showing everybody the future of corn production here on this.
Well,
that's what it is.
And the way the mindset and the chemical mindset that when it comes to herbicide, well, you can't cut rates. You got to up the rate. No, you don't. I mean, you can use less and do better.
Be more efficient.
There you go.
Yeah, be way more efficient.
I mean, they don't, chemical companies aren't going to like hearing what I just said there, but it's the truth.
No, we're not a chemical company.
Well, I know, but, they like selling chemicals.
All chemical companies listening, I mean, just understand, you're not going to like this very well. So we talked about your equipment. We talked about hybrid selection. We talked about the herbicides, fungicides, insecticides. We talked about your grain complex, which is very, very important. Is there anything else on your farm that, give us some personal information about your farm. It's you and your son?
Yep.
Yeah, some other
Yes, I have
kids
a
that
second
aren't
son that takes care of the hogs, and we get our hog manure from him, and it works very, very well.
Yep.
And I want to touch on that if we can, if we're about done. Fertility is huge. I mean, I don't think it's possible to put too much on. Where guys want to try to get by with 150, 160 pounds of N, if you're only wanting to raise 150, 160 bushel corn or 180 bushel corn, that's probably just fine. But if a guy's wanting to push his yields to 250, 260, 150 pounds of nitrogen isn't going to cut it. It takes a pound of nitrogen for every bushel of corn.
And you shoot, really, you have a yield goal, right?
Yeah.
Tell us what that yield goal is.
It's 300.
Yeah, that's what's sad.
This past year, we hit it quite a bit. I'm not saying just that I seen 300 bushel go through the monitor every now and then. I mean, when I pulled out of the field, the acres I planted divided by the bushels I took off is excess of 300, and that's my goal. I want to raise, I know it's attainable. I've done it. On every acre, it's tough, but it's a goal I set for our farm, and that's what I'm after.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I know you've had some really good yields on your farm. And you got some great ground.
Yeah.
And you're obviously doing the right things to. If anyone's going to do that, that's going to be you with the practices you have.
Do I have a goal of 230? No. I've set it high. I set my goal high, but that's what I'm working towards. Am I wasting money on this high-priced fertilizer? And that's a tough question. I very well could be. I know my hog manure ground can do it. I just want to know what I'm missing in my conventional acres. What am I missing in there? It's got to be, my feel is, it's got to be micronutrients that I'm getting in that hog manure that I'm not adding to my conventional fertilization process.
Yeah, some missing, some weak link that you can't.
I don't know what it is, but it's something. I do know that.
Yeah, that you can't find.
Smaller corn, okay. In a 30-inch row, you got your plants, this close together. Like a friend of mine from town came out here and he says, years ago when I started planting 20-inch rows, he says, "Why are you doing that?" I says, "Well, I'm trying to space my plants further apart." Well, he said, "Jesus, Bob, that's just common sense." He says, "You were planting 30-inch rows, now you're planting 20-inch rows. You're putting them closer together. You're not putting them further apart." I says, "Well, in the row."
That's right.
And Myron, I feel that helps my standability. This plant is 3 inches further away than the next plant. You're not robbing from this guy. You're putting all the
Less competition.
competition.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
When you put them plants further apart, not this way, further apart in the row. I feel standability. The height of corn, I think it's huge. That ear that's sitting way up here on a stalk that's 12 foot tall, it's heavy. When the wind starts blowing and that ear's pulling that big tall stalk over, it's bound to go over. Well, a short stalk down here where that ear's down here, it's leverage.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm trying to say there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Have you had cases where you've had tall corn and you've had a wind event and the tall corn is blowing over and the short corn is not?
Sure.
Yeah, I think everybody sees that, and I think that's why.
A little common sense.
There are people that are pushing back on the shorter statured material, and we've had it for 10 years.
Yeah.
But now they're starting to see, especially when the derecho went through this part of Iowa, the shorter stature, like the 9714 material, stood like a tree, where a lot of other corn just went completely flat.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great to talk about that.
Now, you talked about hybrid selections. These MXs, I don't know a lot. This going to be my first year on the MX varieties, but another old racehorse is the 9808.
Yeah.
Don't leave 9808 out.
No. There's diehard people that feel that's a unmatchable hybrid.
In our conversation, I didn't want to sit here and say, I wish I would have said something about 9808. It's a...
Yeah, you use both 9714 and 9808 on this farm, and I know
I
both,
do.
And even 9808's a shorter statured product, not as short as 9714.
And 9714 is on my early variety. 9808 is towards my longer season hybrid.
Yeah, works well, and you can push its populations.
Yeah, and it'll stand forever.
Yeah.
If it's the last thing you go to pick, you leave your 9808 till last.
Yeah.
Because it's usually the wettest too. Which is fine.
Yeah. Especially for you. You want to be drying corn. You want to avoid the phantom yield loss.
Yeah.
So, tell me. Here's a controversial subject: test weight. Because we've talked about test weight on your farm. We don't focus on test weight. We believe it's a big deal that you don't get docked on test weight. But what have you noticed with, like a 9714, for instance? We've seen it where it comes out, if it comes out wet, it has lower test weight than if it comes out dry. But your theory is you want to take it out wet, which it could have lower test weight than if it's dry. But your theory is if you wait till it's dry, you're losing yield.
Yep.
Unless you take it out wet and dry it down. What we've seen, like with some hybrids, like 9714's one, its test weight will be lower when it's wet than when it gets dry.
Correct. I agree with you.
And on your farm, though, you're saying you want to harvest that wet and you want to dry it down. You don't want it to dry in the field.
Yeah.
So have you seen that, or just talk about it some?
Yes, I have. And, I've heard and experienced, not just heard and experienced, Stine's test weights aren't the greatest. But so I always, every year, every fall when we're doing that, I'll have to have somebody come walk me through that, because I'm not raising bushel, I'm raising weight. When the truck goes to town, it's weight. Well, I'll get explained to me, well, the only difference it's making is how many bushel you can fit in that truck or in that bin is the only, you're only going to get, your volume's going to be down, but your weight. And I had this several times on combine test yields and everything, and the yield's there, but the test weight is not. I'm going to give up a couple pounds of test weight instead of that, coming out of the field at that 20%. I might hybrid alongside it might be 56, 57, and the 9714 down there about 55. But at the end of the day, and the end of the yield test, it always out yields it.
Yeah. You actually have more weight with the 9714, for instance, even though it's taken up a larger volume
Exactly.
than the other hybrid. Yeah, that's.
I've been experienced it every fall.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to touch on that. So, yeah.
And that's good. And last year, it was a very good year last year. I mean, 21. Very high yielding. Test weights were considerably better last year. On, like, say you get burn up and you run out of rain, your test weights are going to be less, and they are.
But I still like, when we talked about you saying phantom yield loss, you don't want to experience that. And the way you don't experience that is you take it out when it's wetter. And I would tell you, even if your test weight's lower when it's wetter, you take it out anyway, and you dry it down, and you're money ahead.
And the yield's there.
Yeah, you're money ahead. So I just want to touch on that.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, that was.
It's very important, I think.
Yeah, and I think we don't like low test weight if you're getting docked at the elevator.
No,
that's bad. But if you're not getting docked at the elevator, a pound's a pound.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Something I like that Stine does gets me my product early. We're sitting here right now, and it's the 1st of April, and my Stine corn has been in my seed shed for 2 months. Other hybrids and other companies that are here, I'm still waiting on corn, and I don't like that. I don't know I like it there ahead of time. It's in a controlled environment. I mean, the heat, it's cool, and I like having my product delivered to me at least 30 to 60 days ahead of when I'm going to plant it.
Okay.
And
we will keep that up then.
Well, it's a little thing that don't make a lot of difference to a lot of people, but it does to me. I like having it here. I know what hybrids I'm going to plant first. I try to put them in my shed that way, and it's something that is very important to me, is having our. I don't want to say, that somebody says, well, go ahead and start planting, and we'll get you the rest of it. Well, I like all the same seed size. When I start in on my 9714, I know it's all one lot. When I start in on my 98, it's all one lot. Sure. You don't have, well, we're going to run over here and get you a box, and we're going to run over here and get you 3 boxes, and we'll have it all to you by the time you're ready for it. I don't like that.
What do you think of seed treatments? You have an opinion on seed treatments on corn or on beans?
Yeah, I do, and you probably don't want to hear it. I think it's a waste of money.
I kind of actually like that answer. I think, statistically, when we put seed treatments in our elite trials, which are conducted over the entire Midwest, we've never seen an economical return.
Well, there's people that live and die by them.
Yeah.
Seed treatments, and I'm one that have tried a lot of them, and they never ever paid me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I mean.
Don't apologize to me. We're not. We don't make seed treatments.
I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I don't. Yeah. A lot of people make a lot of money off them too.
They do. Yeah. Yeah, they do.
They don't want to plant an acre without seed treatment.
Yep. I know some diehard.
Yeah.
Some farmers that are diehard of seed treatment, and you need to let them do what they want to do, I guess. Yeah. But I'm with you. What else can we chat about? What about tiling?
Huge.
On your farms, yeah.
Huge.
Everything's tiled?
Yeah, I wish I had more, but it's very, very important. Shows up as much on a dry year as it does on a wet year.
Sure.
And that don't sound feasible, but it does. I mean, I don't think a guy can ever get enough tile.
Okay. Yeah, that's good too.
I hate saying, I mean, a guy could, spend himself broke putting tile in, but it's very, very important.
Do For your farm, for Manning Ag, do you work with an agronomy group?
Yes, I do.
So you contract that?
Yes, I do.
I was just curious. And they help you with all aspects, or is there just a certain few areas that you really...
Pretty much all aspects.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the toughest thing there is to listen. You know, you can read it on a piece of paper, and you know, but you got to trust them and you got to listen. You know, if they tell you got to go out there and put another 20 pounds of potash,
You better do it.
you better do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
And don't get me wrong on when it comes to that, it's very important. I talked a little bit about it. You know, I hope I'm not wasting money, but I'd rather have a little extra out there than a little not enough. And it's, I know there's guys raising really good corn with just 200 pounds of anhydrous, but or nitrogen, period. But they're kind of maxing it out. You know, I'm in the deal where I'd rather have a little extra, and I know it's expensive, and getting more expensive all the time, the fertilizer and nitrogen, but
if you have a good year and you have the moisture and you have the right conditions,
it'll all pay you back.
you don't want your nitrogen to be a limiting factor
Right.
on your corn yields. I get it. Bob, thank you very much for taking the time to talk about the super management that you do on your Stine hybrids on corn production here on your farm. You know, we talked about first hybrid selection as being the number one factor that you focus on. You talked about population. You talked about fungicide. You talked about your narrow rows and your canopy being phenomenal for weed control. So thanks for doing that. Appreciate your time, and it's fun talking to a grower that is really on the cusp of or really the future of corn production. And what you're doing here, you'll see a number of growers doing in the future with the shorter statured, higher, what we call super management corn hybrids.
I don't know if everything's right, but I'm telling you the way we're doing it, and it's showing up in the yield side, and I appreciate you coming, and I don't mind sharing it with you.
So we've been listening to Myron's conversation with Bob Manning of Waukee, Iowa. Bob's an innovative grower who's had a lot of success with Stine corn, and a lot of interesting insights there, Myron. I was going to ask you a couple things. So I was struck by the fact you asked him what's the most important thing about growing corn, and he said hybrid selection.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and you're right. Typically growers don't say that. And of course, as a seed company, we believe hybrid selection is the lowest hanging fruit. And he understands that. He gets it. So I was shocked when he brought that up, but he had some good points. He talks about just understanding his ground and having the right genetics that work on that ground. And sometimes as a seed company, we get a little bit angry at growers that come up and say, well, that doesn't work on my field. But I would tell you Bob Manning has figured out what works on his fields and what doesn't work on his fields.
Sure, and I recall one of the things that came up in the interview, a lot of conversation about 9714 seems to be one of his favorites, as it is for a lot of our growers who are narrow row, higher population.
Yes, yeah, Bob's been in 20-inch rows for a long time. I'm not sure exactly how long. And then he has a lot of manure he puts on ground, and we all know that's one of the best fertility sources. And he's able to crank those populations up and get the production. And he has to have a hybrid that can do that doesn't fall down flat. And he understands that 9714 is that hybrid.
And like I said, it seems to be a common thread, because I remember in the interview 2 weeks ago with Darren Judd talking about 9714 being one of his kind of bellwether products also. Another topic, that Bob talked about that I thought was interesting is this concept of what he called phantom yield loss. Elaborate on that a little bit. I think that was interesting.
Yeah. So he's a strong believer that if you let your corn dry down in the field down to its proper moisture for storage, that you will get yield loss if you do that. So he goes in and he wants it at 22%.
Yeah, I wrote down the quote. I want full season corn. I want 22% corn all fall.
Yep, and he dries it. He dries it, and it is true. If you look at the data and you talk to enough growers, there is such a thing as phantom yield loss, and he lives by that. That to him, that's hybrid selection is one key component, but then harvest and harvesting early and drying is another key component to maximizing performance on that acre.
Talking about planters and equipment, there was conversation about high-speed planting equipment, which is kind of a big thing now, and certainly Bob seems like he's been made a believer of the high-speed planting technology that's out there.
Oh yeah, he made a point. I mean, we talked about that at depth. He was very skeptical at first, like many of us were. And his comment was, they told him the faster he goes, the more accurate that planter is. He still didn't believe him, but he did it himself, and he said they were correct.
Well, and interestingly, I think you and I were in a conversation with a grower from Illinois just a few weeks ago who said sort of the inverse of that, where he said it's much better planter at 10 miles an hour than it is at 4 or 5.
Yes.
So whatever they did, they've set it up for that very purpose.
Yeah, and it seems that shouldn't happen. And I think the reason we believe that is so many of us remember back to the old finger pickup days where farmers would have to spend the money to make sure their finger pickup planter was just in perfect condition or in tip-top shape, and then they really couldn't, if they were at 4.5 mile an hour, that was probably the perfect singulation or the perfect accuracy of that planter, and so we're used to that. But this new technology obviously just throws that out the window.
Yeah. Talking a little bit about inputs. So I know, Bob mentioned sulfur, which of course, again, is a common thread that we hear repeatedly throughout, these super management customers. And then also talking about fungicide, which I thought was interesting. He said he'd done a lot of testing of single application versus multiple application. His finding is one properly timed single application is the way to go in his mind.
Yeah, that's what he's seen. However, I would tell you he's open. He's definitely open to looking, to continually looking at that and testing to make sure that that's the right thing.
Okay. And then talking about trait mix, I think, again, I think a lot of his corn has been, glyphosate corn or herbicide tolerant corn. Not heavy on the traits, and I think he's indicating that that's where he's had the best results. Is that right?
I think he's looked at his farm, and he understands where he needs an insect trait, where he doesn't. So, I think that makes a lot of sense. Why pay for an insect trait in an acre if you don't need it? Seems pretty simple to me, and he's done a very good job with that.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I was fascinated about this conversation too, something that sometimes gets overlooked in the conversation about shorter stature corn. We talk about light interception, right? But Bob actually talked about the potential for weed control. Even in short corn, when you combine it with narrow rows, he said, short corn can shade out weeds, and it can potentially add some utility to your weed control opportunities.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. He commented on that, and he talked about and I'm not sure if it was actually in the interview or not in the final recording, but he talked about less biomass, and it's easier to deal with that biomass with the shorter statured products versus the taller ones.
Yeah, certainly if you're corn on corn, that's something you want to pay really close attention to.
All right.
So for a grower who's going to go to Bob Manning's place and talk to Bob and get an understanding of his operation, what kind of take-home message would a grower have after visiting with and checking out, Bob's operation?
Bob understands the low-hanging fruit, and to him, it's hybrid selection. The next thing is harvest. It sounds pretty simple, but he wants to harvest it wet. He would like to dry it down. Then the next, probably the third low-hanging fruit in Bob's mind is understanding his acre and understanding, do I need an insect trait? Do I not? So on and so forth. And so he does a nice job of all those things, which at the end of the day, he gets performance, but then he's doing it cost effectively.
Yep, I think that sums it up perfectly. Well, we've been listening to Myron Stine, visiting with Bob Manning of Manning Ag Service in Waukee, Iowa. They've been talking about Bob and his super management techniques for working with Stine corn. Myron, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Well, that's our time for today. I'd like to thank our guests and our listeners for joining us on another episode of the Stine Seedcast. We'll be back again soon with more expert insights about all things Stine. And to never miss an episode, subscribe to the Stine Seedcast wherever podcasts are found.
Subscribe to the Stine Seedcast wherever podcasts are found. To learn more about Stine and its elite corn and soybean genetics, visit stineseed.com. Stine has yield.